Good morning and welcome back. So today we're going to be starting a brand new pose at my portrait painting group with the model Dacia. So this is going to be the start of a 5-week pose from life. I'm going to bring my sketchbook stuff and just kind of sketch around with some ideas just with charcoal on toned paper. And then we're going to set up some props, maybe some synthetic flowers and things like that, and really get a nice composition going. Hello there and welcome to a quick and simple portrait drawing demonstration. So initially, if you see those lines that I made earlier, I was actually trying to make a compositional sketch, but then I changed my mind and decided to do a portrait study because I'm much more used to doing portrait studies before starting a longer compositional sketch or like a longer painting. So the idea here is to work with mass, and I'm working with just Nitram soft charcoal, and I'm working on a toned paper. And if you're interested in what materials I'm using, you can go ahead and scroll down to the description box down below, and I'm going to have all the materials typed up. So the first thing I'm really looking for in this drawing is shape and overall placement of shape, and that's it. And I'm working basically from the inside out rather than trying to get a perfect outline and just kind of filling in filling in the space. Rather, I'm working with simple elements, simple masses, and the reason behind this is that charcoal is very forgiving. And notice how quickly I'm moving, and no, this is not in time lapse. And here's an image of the model Dacia, and I'm going to keep going back and forth between that shot and the drawing footage, and that is because I'm trying to assimilate what it's like for me to actually observe from life, though my vision is it's not as good as the quality of the uh, picture when you're actually observing Dacia. So as you can see, I'm working from life, which is my preferred way to work, to be honest. I really love drawing portraits regardless. So, if I'm doing a portrait from a photo reference like I do most of the time, it's fine. Now you're seeing me using a kind of a horizontal line. It's very interesting to observe the drawing process from this perspective because you actually have me, you have the drawing, and you have the model all in one shot. So this is pretty interesting to see my motions, and look how far I am. So it's kind of hard to tell from this perspective, to be honest, but I am pretty much an arm's length away from my drawing paper. And I'm working very loosely. And again, the idea is to work from the inside out as opposed to trying to get a perfectly finished outline and then, filling in the spaces. I don't like to think of it like a coloring book. And there's nothing wrong with coloring books, don't get me wrong. It's just that there's a lot of energy and a lot of dynamic movement in the start of these initial shapes. Even look at that. I'm putting in a little like circle, little spiral shape with the charcoal just to kind of hint at where the flowers are going to fit. And now I'm starting to shade in a simple tone for the shadow of the side of the face, along with the dark shade for the hair. And again, here we have a close-up image of our model Dacia. And now that fade that I'm using, the fade to black that you're seeing, so fade to black is the name of the transition from one shot to the other. So that fade, actually, I'm editing it that way so you can see it as if you're seeing from my eyes, as if I was blinking from one image to the next. But when I'm working from life, do you see the size that our model's head is? That's pretty much the size that I see it from my picture plane. So I'm actually pretty far back. So it does limit the amount of information I can see, which can be seen as a disadvantage, but it's actually, for me at this stage, it's an advantage because rather than looking at a bunch of little tiny details and minutia, I'm looking at shape. So like the outside shape, so the outside shape of the forehead, just relating that to the cheek, looking down across from that area there, we have the cheekbone, zygomatic bone, but it doesn't have to be that specific just yet. So one thing I'll tell you from experience, I have drawn so many portraits. I've painted so many portraits. Um, and I'm going to tell you things from my kind of perspective in terms of what it's like to start a portrait after doing so many portraits. Okay, so some of you may be beginners out there. You may be very early in your art development or your drawing and painting development. One thing I will say, the more and more I create these drawings and these paintings, the more and more I realize you can start however you want. And it's kind of a weird way to think about it, but the truth is, it's a language, okay? So observing these shapes, so observing the model and it visually interpreting what we're observing there from life, whether it be from life or from photo reference. It's a language, actually. So we take in visual information and we process it in our mind, and when we describe it in terms of shapes, or whether it be shapes of just monochrome, like a drawing, or shapes of color. And that's the key, really. It's a language, okay? So it doesn't matter if you start trying to perfectly outline everything and then shade it in. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that that's a bad thing. It's just that after so many portraits that I've created, so many portrait drawings and paintings, from experience, I'll tell you, get something on the paper. It doesn't matter how you start, as long as you know how to interpret and analyze the visual information. And it doesn't have to be so cold. It doesn't have to be so calculated. It doesn't have to be so meticulous as we would think with a portrait. Now, with portrait, you play a very delicate balance between an interpretive, creative, expressive nature and the literal expression of nature. So the literal would be the photograph. If I were to take the photograph, trace the photograph perfectly, spot match every single value, every single shade of value, sure, I'll get a realistic image. But I lose a sense of creative expression that we get when we are drawing a portrait, and not to mention the psychological aspects of drawing portraits in this kind of way. So again, I'm putting in very simple masses of light and dark, and right away, without really that much time, what has it been, like 6 minutes? Like in the 6 minutes now, we have the entire working space established, minus the background and the drapery. We won't get too much into the background or the drapery. Since it did take a while to set up the model, it did take almost an hour actually to set up the pose between my drawing group and I. We were really trying to set up a narrative pose. Remember, this is taking place in my Tuesday morning portrait group. I run a Tuesday morning portrait groups in Howard County Arts Council, Maryland, and it runs from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. So we started maybe like 11:10 or whatever, and then closer to 12 something was when we finally had the pose set up and the lighting and everything like that. So in any case, I am trying to work rather quickly, so this is going to be much more of an abbreviated sketch from life, which has a lot of elegance to it. Just creating a sketch from nature, there's so much visual poetry in the way that these shapes are described, and there's a lot of interactive. There's a very interactive quality. Okay, you notice me standing back, moving forward, standing back. Every time I stand back, basically I go out of frame. So you're seeing just the entire process, all of the poetic movements. Notice how I'm using one side of the stump. So here is Deja again. So taking a close look at her hair. Okay, so I'm using the light side of the stump to subtract some of the charcoal, but the nice thing about the stump is it doesn't subtract as much charcoal as, say, the chamois cloth. The cloth that you saw me erase with earlier, that is called a chamois, or as my my teacher, John DeMartin, would say chamois, but I'm going to just call it chamois. So the chamois cloth subtracts much more than the light side of the stump. And so, like I said before, we're drawing from the inside out. So now with the corner of the nose, we're starting to mass in a very simple dark shape. And you can even see it in that very blurred image that you're seeing of the model in the background. See the little blur of dark for the nose? That's essentially what I'm seeing. But of course, I can see it with a little more focus than we're seeing in the camera, just because the camera is focused on the drawing. So basically a smudge, okay? You can start the nose like a smudge. You can start the eyes like a smudge. It's just a smudge that is related to the other smudges. And the beauty of working from life is that you really get to take in the entire experience, just like the old masters. Just like the old masters in the past, this is how they worked. This is kind of like seeing a blast from the past. If we were to go in a little time capsule and see how Rembrandt or Caravaggio or all of them worked, they most likely had a model there and not a photo reference, right? I'm stating the obvious. But they most likely worked with the live model there. And they probably worked in a very similar fashion, though I'm sure with much more elegance than what I'm doing. But you get my point. There is a timeless quality to this kind of way of working. And so now we're starting to mass in. We just masked in on the eye to the right of your screen a little bit of a halftone and then subtracted a little bit of light. So charcoal, whether it's soft vine charcoal, medium vine charcoal, or Nitram charcoal like what I'm using here, it allows you to work as if you were working with paint because it has this kind of very loose and forgiving quality. And another thing you'll notice, you may have noticed it already, but my Nitram charcoal or the Stump, sorry, not the Stump, the charcoal that I'm using, I actually didn't really sharpen it before the drawing. I kind of loosely like sharpened it from the side, and then the tip broke, to be completely honest. And then I kind of gave up on it. But to start off the drawing, I challenge you to not have to use such a sharpened point, and that's a very strange way to think about it, isn't it? I'm sure most teachers will tell you to use a sharpened point all the time. But the reason that I'm okay with using a point that's not so sharp is that I'm not worried about making a mark precisely here or precisely there. Rather, I'm making very simple and bold statements and relating these simple and bold statements to one another and then conjuring up an image in that kind of way. And I'm going to try not to speak so consistently at the same tone or whatever. So I will slow down once in a while with my narration, just so that you don't hear me talking so monotone throughout the entire drawing. So again, a lot of it is just taking in the visual information. And a lot of it does end up being intuitive. And I think that that's something that we build after so many drawings, so many paintings. We build our intuitive skills, our intuition. Now you'll notice how each one of the features is almost nothing. Though you may have to zoom in a little bit or get close to your phone screen or your computer screen to see, but each one of the features, I'm keeping these features simple and easy. And you know what I'm going to say now, right? I'm keeping them simple and easy. So when the time comes to make changes, those changes are simple and easy to manage. And that is key. You want to be able to see the entire thing all at once, okay? See the entire thing all at once, stand back, and if it looks different, if it looks different in nature than what you're seeing on your picture, change it. Continue to change it. Remember, a drawing, I forget, someone said this in the past, but a drawing is nothing more than correcting your last mistakes or a series of corrections. As my teacher, Paulden Hamilton, would say, step forward an error, or something like that. I'm probably butchering what he would say, but he would say something along the lines of that. So here we have, again, we're looking at our model Daisha. All right, now we're just going to put in more of the background and just going to stump it, blend it in with the stump. And now with the eraser, notice how I'm just very easily just subtracting for the flowers. Yeah, I know it's kind of sloppy, but I just felt like very quickly putting in the flowers. And now little highlights for the earrings. And I used a white pencil for that. And again, I will type up exactly what pencil I used in the description box down below. And again, just trying to push the darks for the hair. And I really like the expressive quality that these charcoal drawings can have. And it's that expressive quality, I think, that I truly enjoy in realist art. Though I like art to be very, very realistic and traditional and all that stuff. I really do enjoy, however, when you see the process, when you get an idea of, is this painter or a draftsperson left-handed or are they right-handed? You can tell with the mark making. There's a lot of visual poetry within all of this. And just subtracting with the light part of the stump, some little shapes for the hair, for the dreads of the hair. And it's that creative expression, I think, that really allows me to enjoy working from nature because I'm seeing and I'm observing the visual information, and my hand is almost just intuitively making marks. And so we're just going to push a little bit of a darker accent on the corner of the hair. And notice even the little hand gestures that I make. I'm actually much faster, as I mentioned many times before. I'm much faster when I'm not painting or drawing and talking at the same time. So I believe this drawing was created in less than 2 hours, I would say. Very simple and quick way to sketch. And if I could make drawings like this every single day, I think that it would improve my ability to paint exponentially, I believe. And just trying to put in more attention into some of the dreads, less attention into others. So the key really is simplicity when it comes to the hair. And the image, the blurred image that you're seeing of the model in the background, um, is actually a really nice way to see that simple shape in its essence. And again, I'm not putting a photo reference to the top left corner of your screen like I do with my other videos, just because I didn't work from photo reference, so it just kind of makes sense to show you how I would be seeing it and putting in, like the images, the closer images of the model from life. And you can even see the models talking to us. So again, the model doesn't have to be perfectly still. And remember, change is the only constant in nature. So when you're working from life, it's important not to chase the pose. Always establish your center line. Look for the verb in the beginning of your drawing. And don't chase the pose. And if the model turns in any which way, just correct them. Like for Daisha, I would actually tell her to move her head more towards her right. So, I would correct her pose once in a while. But don't dwell in this idea. Don't constantly live in this idea that the model is a statue, because the model is never going to be perfectly still like a statue. And so right now I'm just observing the contour. I'm sorry my face is blocking some of the footage, but just looking at the contour for the side of the eye socket, very closely now, just trying to observe every one of these little shapes. And again, I don't really think it's a good idea to try to get something super perfect. Notice how I was moving with my hands because I was really just trying to feel out the shape. See that? How I move my hands there? A little more light. We're putting in a little more of a highlight on the bulb of the nose. And I tell you, working from life is one of the. I love working from life, like drawing portraits in particular from life. So one way to get really good at painting, I will be honest, is to get really good at drawing. And one way to get really good at oil painting is to get really, really good at charcoal drawing. And I'm not going to say that I'm really, really good, but I have a lot of experience when it comes to drawing portraits. And I will go so far as to say that I'm pretty sure this is my preferred way, my favorite way to do a portrait drawing. And see how the when we move up close to the model, like we lose a little bit of that creative expression and the cold accuracy of the camera. So again, it's a balance. It's a balance between trying to perfectly place down what you're seeing and then putting in your own touch, your creative expression. There is a delicate balance between these things. And it's also a lot of fun when we're working with such a time constraint. You know, creating a portrait drawing in less than 2 hours is really a task. Notice how I'm kind of like blurring some of the edges with the stump. And again, that's how I work from the inside out. I establish a general mass and then use the stump to just kind of guide the mass into a much more specific shape and then close in on it. Ultimately, as you're seeing with the nose and the chin, with a more well-defined line, as opposed to trying to fill in the space from a completely finished contour. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. Everyone has their own preference and the way they like to work. One of the quotes from one of my favorite artists, the late Nelson Shanks, would say, find form with freedom. And I think that's something you're really seeing here in the way that this drawing was developed. And there's even more freedom, I will admit, in the way this drawing was created as opposed to my other ones, simply because I wasn't talking and drawing at the same time. You're seeing me in my natural element, working from life, and not painting and talking at the same time. Though I like to do that, but I feel like painting and talking or drawing and talking is its own kind of art form, to be honest. It does produce a different result ultimately, but I think it's important to have a balance between everything. And just look at the way that the marks are being laid on the drawing. I almost said brushstrokes, but they're almost like brushstrokes, to be honest. And now this is basically the final touches, just putting in little curves for the dreads of the hair. Just trying to get the shapes. Soften some of the edges here. And that's about it. So that is going to be the conclusion of this quick and simple portrait drawing sketch in charcoal. Don't worry though, we're going to see much more of our model Dacia because this is only a study for a much larger painting we're going to see later on. Here we are in the resident visual artists exhibition. So how about we check out some artwork? And with that, I think that's going to conclude today's episode. It was a lot of fun to set up that long pose with my art group. It certainly did take a while, but I think that all of our collected efforts really did turn out a very nice result with the the pose that the model's in and the environment. And on top of that, we got to create a really fun and expressive portrait drawing sketch. That being said, in a world that could be so negative, be the spark that ignites the positivity within all of us. The more positivity we bring into our lives, the better our lives will be. I really hope that you enjoy every single day of your life. I really do enjoy every single day that I can draw or every single day that I can paint. I wish you the best in all of your artwork, and as always, I'll be back again very soon.